My name is Janis Brizga. I've been working for environmental organizations for the last 15 years in Latvia, but also internationally, working with issues of sustainable development, sustainable consumption, and last year I graduated University of Latvia, got my PhD in geography. I've always been interested in how the social economic systems impact on the environment, and that's been also part of my studies during the last years, looking at the drivers in changes of the economic systems and also drivers in changes of behavior, and how these behavioral changes or changes in economic systems actually have impacts on environmental systems. So I think these interlinkages between social, economic and environment are most important ones to understand. I was talking about the study we just recently did with our colleagues here at University of Maryland, looking at the drivers behind the changes in CO2 emissions in former Soviet Union over the last 20 years, from 1990 to 2010. I've been working in a region for quite some long time, and I have traveled to most of these countries and worked with people, both NGOs and also decision makers, and looking at environmental policies and what we can do. And this is an interesting way to looking at the same countries, the same problems, just from the different perspective, using the composition analysis to analyze the changes in emissions in the region, and understanding what happened and why the emissions decreased so dramatically after the collapse of Soviet Union. We were looking at looking for main drivers which actually make the changes in emissions, and affluence, energy intensity, and industrialization are the main driving forces which actually increased emissions during the last decade, but also they were the same drivers actually decreasing the emissions in the beginning of 90s. So that the same drivers, they have kind of opposite roles. They could be increasing the emissions and at the same time also decreasing, and the countries from the region are very different from each other, and there were big differences in the region before the collapse of Soviet Union, but these differences are increasing over the years, and now there are even bigger differences, so that the region actually is so diverse that you cannot look at it as a one country. Like in many global studies, the former Soviet Union is one data line with the numbers on former Soviet Union, but using this kind of aggregate approach, you miss out a lot of detail which actually are showing that these countries are very, very different. We've been analyzing these driving forces behind the emissions, and the interesting findings are that these drivers are acting differently during the economic growth and during economic recession. And when you are looking at the future economic performance of the region, many of the countries now in Europe and also in the region of former Soviet Union actually are facing the economic recession. So to have more understanding of how economic recession impacts the changes in emissions, I think, are important aspects you should look at. I think it's a lot of possibilities to continue work in this area, because there's been very few studies looking at the different countries of former Soviet Union and changes in emissions, and the results also show that there are very significant changes over a very short time period in some of the countries like in Georgia or Turkmenistan, and analyzing these changes in more depth, I think it will bring more practical implications which you can use further.